So what is the best Pokemon game on the Nintendo 64? Think about it carefully because there is a correct answer to this. Okay? That is, of course, whatever the heck you want it to be, because at the end of the day, it's just our opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and that is, of course, what this entire video is right now. Just my own opinion on what I think the best definitive 64 Pokemon experience is. So I thought it might be a fun idea to take a look at all of the Pokemon 64 games, talk about them a little bit, just sort of discuss and share my own thoughts and experiences with those games, and just try and figure out what I personally think the best 64 Pokemon game is. Not really ranking the games per se, so I figured we'd go at it from release order and, just sort of talk about them and, see what happens. So, first up, we've got Pokémon Stadium, and no, not that one. This is actually Pocket Monsters Stadium, which was released in August of 1998 exclusively in Japan. We never actually got this game anywhere outside of Japan. It was 100% exclusive to them, and is very much so a bare-bones version of the stadium that we would get later. There's significantly less from this game. We're missing quite a bit. If I'm not mistaken, there's only 40 playable Pokemon. Granted, they are in 3D, and we love that, but there's only 40, and it's also missing a variety of the things that you would later get in the real release of Pokemon Stadium. So there's 111 Pokemon missing from this game, and it does seem like they were going to be released via the 64 DD, and, that was kind of a flop, so it never actually came to fruition. But it was definitely planned, and I really wish the DD would have taken off. I just think that's a really neat peripheral for the 64. This is, of course, also missing the lovely mini-games that we would all know and love, and if I'm not mistaken, you actually had to be hooked up with your Pokemon game, via the transfer pack Red, Blue, and Yellow, and you had to be saved inside of a Pokemon Center to access any of the other game modes aside from the Battle mode. So since this was never released outside of Japan, my knowledge and experience with this game is zero, essentially. I've never actually played this game, so I have no real experience with the game. So, admittedly, I've not played it. I maybe can't fully judge this game, but if we're being completely honest, it's a fairly lackluster game when you compare it to what we would later get. So, is it the best Pokemon 64 game? Probably not. Hey You Pikachu was the first Pokemon game released outside of Japan for the Nintendo 64, and wow, what a game. Truly unique in its own way. There's nothing quite like it, even today. So this is a very interesting game. I originally was going to compare it to like Animal Crossing, and that's maybe a bit disingenuous. It's not anything like Animal Crossing. It is a pet simulator, I guess you could say, at its core. And it's a very unique game because it uses the microphone peripheral for the Nintendo 64. And this is, of course, extremely unique because it is literally the only Nintendo 64 game in America that uses the microphone. I believe there was only one other game, if I did my research right, that actually uses the microphone, so really this is a very unique experience. No other game uses this microphone. So the idea behind this game is you're helping Professor Oak with this device he made. I think it's called like the Poke Helper or the Poke Help maybe, which is of course a device designed by Professor Oak to speak to Pokemon. And then you come across this wild Pikachu, this cute little Pikachu, and you can talk to it, you can control it, or I guess more so you direct it with the microphone. You're not actually controlling Pikachu. So this is a very unique game. You're not battling in it like you would normal Pokemon games, nothing like that. You're just helping Pikachu and just trying to see how he interacts with the Pokemon, and there are, of course, various tasks. I'm not going to dive into the nitty-gritty of the game or anything like that, but it's a very cozy game, and I definitely remember when I was playing this game growing up, I was just in awe. I did not understand how, admittedly limiting the game actually is. I wondered, how big is this game? How much can Pikachu actually understand? And it was just a truly unique experience being able to talk to Pikachu. I love just speaking into the microphone and seeing the little bubble pop up and then fly over to Pikachu and just watching him process that information. I always wondered, what all he could actually understand. Admittedly, not that much. I think I saw there's like 200 phrases that are programmed in, and the Wikipedia gives examples like thunder, thunderbolt, thundershock, obvious ones that you would expect. But I remember back then I just assumed or wondered that if he could actually understand me. It was kind of cool. It was like a friend away from friends, as pathetic as that might sound. It was almost therapeutic in that way, being able to just talk to somebody who was clearly trying to listen, even if you couldn't actually process what you were saying. But there are various different locations that you can travel to, and different mission types that you can experience. It's really neat to see Pikachu interact with these Pokemon. You can go fishing, and you can just see how he interacts with like the Caterpie and Bulbasaur and Abra and all these other different Pokemon. It doesn't have all 151 Pokemon, which is fair. I wouldn't expect this game to actually have all of the Pokemon, but they've got a decent amount of them that you can interact with. I definitely did not beat this game growing up. I was doing my research recently, and I was actually very sad to see how the game ends, kind of. You actually have to inevitably shoo the Pikachu away once you've completed all the missions for Professor Oak. You just have to keep saying goodbye into the microphone, and that just seems so sad to me. I don't think I could do that. Obviously, the Pikachu comes back and doesn't actually go away, and then you can just keep playing the game, but very heartbreaking. I don't like it. But I do actually love this game. Very fantastic game. Truly unique. There's nothing else quite like it. And it never got like a real sequel. You could argue that the Pokemon Channel on the GameCube is sort of a pseudo sequel, but there's no microphone component to that, and it's just not quite the same. But it is similar in nature. Wasn't maybe the most well-received games in terms of like critics and ratings and whatnot. I personally think it's a very fun game, and if you've never tried it, you should definitely check it out. I definitely thought this game was a lot bigger growing up. It obviously is somewhat limiting, but it is still a super fun game. Even if it is not the most grand game in the world, it's definitely worth checking out. I think any Pokemon fan would find a truly fun time with this game. So, is it the best Pokemon game on the 64? It's certainly the cutest. Pokémon Snap is an on-rails shooter game for the Nintendo 64, and that definitely feels weird coming out of my mouth. It's not like your traditional on-rails shooter. We're not actually pumping lead into Pokemon. This isn't Pal World or anything like that. The takeaway is, of course, it is an on-rails game. I guess you are shooting Pokemon with camera rolls, with pictures, or you're throwing apples at them, or that kind of stuff, but you're not actually blasting through Pokemon. Typically, when I think on-rails shooters, I don't get the best impressions. I think I like those weird games in like Terminator Salvation that you'll see in like a movie theater arcade. That's an on-rails game. Not necessarily a ton of replayability with those. They kind of are what they are. Typically, I don't necessarily have the best impression of an on-rails game, but this is definitely unique. Pokémon Snap definitely takes it to another level. You might not think that there's a ton of replayability there, but there really is. So basically what you're doing is you're on Pokemon Island. I know, very, very unique name there. They definitely tried their hardest with that. And you're helping out Professor Oak by taking pictures. You're hopping in the 01, I believe, is the little vehicle that you're in. And literally, you're taking pictures. It's Pokemon Snap. That's all you're doing in this game. You're taking pictures. It might not sound fun on the surface, but I promise you, this is a truly awesome game. There's genuinely a lot of replayability there. There's so many different Pokemon, not 151 Pokemon, keep that in mind. I definitely remember growing up just assuming that all 151 Pokemon were here, but they're not, and I guess I can see why all 151 wouldn't be in there, but I definitely feel like we maybe could have had all 151 in there, but I won't get into that. I won't complain about that. But yeah, basically you're tasked with going through the various sections of the island and taking the best picture, and that alone kind of gives you limitless possibilities. You can really play through this game every single time and experience something different just with your pictures alone. It's really neat to see how all of the Pokemon interact with not only you and your items. You got various items like the Pokeflute and the food and all that, but it's also fun to see how they interact with each other. It's like almost a really immersive experience, and it kind of reminds me of like the new games today, like Scarlet and Violet, how we have overworld Pokemon, and you can kind of see how they interact with each other, and it's kind of like it's ahead of its time in a way. We really did not get anything like that until those Switch games like Scarlet and Violet. And there's quite a few secrets that you just won't necessarily catch on your first playthrough, so it is worth playing through multiple times. My experience with this game is I never owned it. Believe it or not, I never owned this game. There was a local video game store that probably didn't make it much past the 64's life, but that's where I would rent a lot of my games, and this was one of the games I would rent. So I did put a decent amount of time into it, maybe not as much as like Hey You Pikachu, but I definitely had my fair share of time with it, and it was super fun. I never beat the game. In fact, I didn't even realize like half of the levels. I mean, maybe I played them and I just don't remember, but like that rainbow level, the rainbow bridge, I think is what it's called. I never even knew that existed, but that is like such a cool level. It is such a pretty level, and it's something that you kind of just think Mario would have, but I don't know. Super neat experience. I absolutely love this game. This is definitely a good on-rails game, you know, something more akin to like Star Fox 64. That is a fantastic on-rails game. And speaking of Star Fox 64, something I wish this game would have done, because Star Fox 64 was clearly capable of doing it, they had like the all-range mode, where there were certain parts and certain levels where you actually had full movability, you know? And I don't know, I think that they maybe could have had sections of these levels, assuming that they didn't, because maybe I'm just misremembering, but yeah, just certain parts of levels where they could kind of wall you off and you actually had full range of the 0-1, and you could actually maybe get more up close and just interact in a more unique way. Definitely a very fun game. So fun, in fact, that they actually did make a sequel for the Nintendo Switch called New Pokémon Snap. I have not played that one. I definitely have it on my list. I would love to play that one day. And it's worth mentioning that that actually has over 151 Pokemon. It doesn't have all of them. No Pokemon games these days ever do have all the Pokemon, so that's a little disappointing, but definitely more than this game has to offer for sure. So, is this the best Pokemon game on the 64? I don't know. We've got a couple more to look at. And here we finally have it. Pokemon Stadium, the real Pokemon Stadium. My bread and butter, let me just tell you, this is easily the game I put the most time into. I have so many fond memories of this game. So basically, Pokemon Stadium, this full one that we got everywhere, this is the first Pokemon game where you finally have access to all 151 Pokemon in full, gorgeous 3D. They look fantastic. I personally feel like they hold up to today. You know, yeah, that's my own opinion. Maybe you think that they look kind of blocky or whatever, but I think they look fantastic. And it's not just the Pokemon too. It's the whole game, the environment, the stadiums that you're in. You know, all of the different stages that you can play on. They look just so gorgeous, and they really sell the idea that you're in a stadium. That's what this game is. You're fighting in a stadium. It's like a tournament-esque type thing if you think about it that way. And it's just fantastic. And of course, the freaking announcer dude, is that his name? The announcer, the spokesperson? I love that guy. I'll admit, growing up, there were times I probably hated him. He was kind of annoying, but he really helps tie this game together. He's very iconic. I'll never be able to forget his voice. His lines are just permanently in my brain. I'll never be able to forget it. But yeah, essentially at its core, this is a battle simulator. That's what you're doing. You're finally being able to play Pokemon like you did in the handheld games, Red, Blue, and Yellow. You're actually able to battle them. You can battle your friends. You can battle, computer players, all sorts of stuff. They've got the various different cups that you can play through. I was always a fan of the Petite Cup. I don't know why. I like being able to play as like the little baby Pokemon in a more serious setting, I guess. It was kind of fun that way. There was also the Gym Leader Challenge, or the Gym Leader Tower, maybe. I can't remember exactly what that's called. Where, of course, you can play through and fight all of the gym leaders and fight all their goons and their henchmen, and of course the Elite Four and the champion. Very awesome experience. And of course, if you were talented enough, you could do round 2, which of course just increases the difficulty. And let me just say, I'm no competitive player, but using those rental Pokemon were pretty rough. They aren't the most fair. I'm not going to dive into that. You should definitely check out Livid's video. Shout out to Livid. He makes a really cool video about Pokemon Stadium, and he dives a little bit more into that, and you should just check out his video. It's a very good video. But of course, you could also hook up your own Pokemon via the transfer pack, Red, Blue, and Yellow, and you could use your own Pokemon in these games, in this this tournament setting, whether you wanted to do the Gym Leader Challenge or just fight your friends in full 3D, you could do that. And it was just really neat being able to use your Pokemon that you used on your journey on the big screen in 3D. It was just an awesome experience. You also had access to like extra Pokemon storage and the ability to trade. Can't tell you enough how clutch that was. For whatever reason, me and my brother, there were so many times we just either wouldn't have 2 Game Boys or we wouldn't have a working link cable. And so sometimes trading was difficult, but I was able to use this game to trade and get certain evolutions that way. It came in very clutch for me there. There's, of course, also the mini games. I absolutely love the mini games. They're so fun. Kind of gives like this Mario Party feel to it. Obviously, not as many mini games, and you're not competing for like a star or a prize or anything like that. They are just kind of one-off mini games, but they're very fun. I really like the Dig Dig Dig, I think is the one that it was called. That was one that really stands out to me. I also really like the Sushi Go Round with Lickitung. I don't know, those were just the 2 that come to mind that I remember having a lot of fun with. And of course, you can play 1 to 4 players with all your friends, or you can go up against the CPU, who may or may not cheat in certain situations. As fun as the minigames are, the best thing about Pokemon Stadium for me is, of course, the Game Boy Tower. Holy cow, the Game Boy Tower is literally the best addition in any Pokemon game. Like, this game allowed you to actually play Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow with the transfer pack on the big screen. A big lit, keep that in mind, lit CRT, just crisp looking TV. It was the best way to play those games. And of course you had those cool unique borders depending on which game you played. And wow, that alone is why I've played Kanto so many times. I've easily played Kanto hundreds upon hundreds of times, and that is why, because if you progressed far enough into Pokemon Stadium, you could unlock the Doduo and Dodrio towers, which let you speed up your game, and you could literally beat any of those Gen 1 games in like a day or an afternoon if you were so inclined. You could literally plug that game in and form an entire new team in just a day, like summer vacation or spring break or maybe just a weekend. Pop that sucker in and literally cruise through a game in an entire day. That alone is why I've played that game so many times. It's the best experience, and like I said, it's lit. It's on a nice tube TV, not just, an unlit Game Boy, I love my Game Boy, but back then it was not modded. I didn't have any light for it except for maybe a worm light, and if you've used a worm light, those things kind of suck. So this just offered up a whole new way to play those games. Pokemon Stadium truly is the jack of all trades. You can do so many things with this game. It's phenomenal. So, is it the best Pokemon game on the 64? It's definitely a contender, but we've got a couple more to look at. Pokemon Puzzle League. I'm gonna be completely honest, not really my cup of tea. This is, of course, a Tetris Attack style Pokemon game that was actually not released in Japan. They did not get that. We got this one, but they did not. So that's kind of unique. But if I'm being honest, Tetris just really is not my game. I'm not trying to come for Tetris. I appreciate Tetris. I played a little bit of Tetris, but it was not really my genre of game. Tetris is, of course, a fantastic game, Nintendo knew what they were doing pairing that in with the original Game Boy. Like, it sold like hotcakes. People love to get themselves some Tetris, but just not really me. I've never been one to really get too into Tetris. If I were to play Tetris, I would probably want to play a themed Tetris like Pokemon Puzzle League. And full transparency, I never even played this game until it was on the Switch Online. It may have not even been like on my radar at all until the Switch Online. Like, I really just don't know that I knew about it. So, admittedly, I have very little experience with this game. I've only dabbled with it a little bit with the Switch Online. It's, like I said, it's not really for me. I'm not hating you or the game at all if you like it. Like, that's totally fine. It's totally valid. Just wasn't really my thing. I can appreciate it for what it is. I think it's neat that it's like tied into the Pokemon series. Obviously, not canon by any means, but it uses characters and themes from the TV show, kind of like Pokemon Yellow. So it is unique in that regards, but not something that I really cared to play too much of. I definitely, as a Pokemon fan and Nintendo 64 lover, I definitely plan to pick this game up physically and put it in my collection. And maybe once I get that, I'll be willing to put more time into it and can truly appreciate it for what it is. But right now, it's just not really my thing. So, is it the best Pokemon game on the 64? For me, no. And last but not least, we finally have Pokemon Stadium 2, or I believe it was called Pocket Monster Stadium GS in Japan, I think at least. The GS, of course, standing for Gold and Silver, the Johto additions to this game. We love the additions of Gen 2. I was always a Gen 2er over a Gen 1er, but that's just me. Crystal's the best, shout out. So basically this game is exactly like Pokemon Stadium, and then some. You know, you have all of the Johto Pokemons. Now we have 251 Pokemon, I believe, in full gorgeous 3D. It basically just adds more to the original Stadium. You know, you've got the same core mechanics, you've got all the different Pokemon Cups, you've got the Gym Leader Castle Challenge thing, now with, of course, the Johto trainers as well. You've got the new Elite Four, you've got the Round 2, of course, as well. All that same good stuff. We've got more mini-games. I think we've got like 12 mini-games now. So we've got several new additions. I really liked the, God, what was it called? It was like the cutting one with like Scizor and Pinsir and Scyther. I really liked that one. I always remember being pretty good at that, but I really liked the, I think it was called Topsy-Turvy with like the Hitmontop. Shout out Beyblade, right? Like, if you've ever played Beyblade, I love you, because I loved Beyblade, and it always just reminded me of Beyblade. I really liked that game mode, so that was really cool. But also with the Johto editions, we have now the ability to play the Gen 2 games, Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, on the big screen with the Game Boy Tower, because the Game Boy Tower is in here as well. That moved over to here as well, and if you know me, you know Pokemon Crystal is my favorite game of all time, and finally being able to play that game on the TV was just phenomenal. I'll be honest, I can't tell you how many times I would plug in Crystal or my brother's Silver to the first stadium just to see if it would work, even though obviously it wouldn't work, but it didn't stop me from trying. I was definitely stupid, and I tried, and not just Pokemon games too, Mario, Metroid. I just wanted to see if it would work, but it obviously did not work, and I did not have an SNES growing up, and I didn't even know that the Super Game Boy existed, so that was just never even really an option for me, so I was desperate to try and play my games on the 64, but finally I could play the Gen 2 games, Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Fantastic, and if you've played those games, you know those are definitely easier and quicker to beat than the Gen 1 games, so being able to play those in like the Doduo and Dodrio speed, it was fantastic. I mean, just like last time, cruising through a game in just like a day, and it was so fun to do that. And of course, I have to give a huge shout out to my brother-in-law, because this just would not be possible without him. He's like a walking Pokemon encyclopedia, and I just remember one particular time when he was visiting, we just stayed up all night, and he just cruised through this game. Like, any bit of competitive knowledge I have, which is very little, I got from him. Definitely, I'm a casual competitor. I'm a casual Pokemon player, so my knowledge is limited, but just watching him beat Round 1, Round 2, the Elite Four, your rival, Mewtwo, all that stuff, he made it look so easy. And he did it with rental Pokemon too, which is extremely impressive. I literally could not have access to half of this game if it weren't for him, so huge shout out to my brother-in-law for making that possible. I thankfully was able to pick this game up before the retro game boom. That was pretty cool. I think I scored this game on eBay for like $25, something like that. And you definitely cannot do that today. This game is a lot more expensive, and you're not getting this for $25 unless it's like a reproduction or a fake game. So I definitely got a fair amount of experience and time put into this game. Probably not as much as the first Stadium. Just looking at both Stadium games, I think I can say that this is the better Stadium game, because it literally is the first Stadium game and then some. So like, if you're gonna pick one of the games to play, you may as well play Stadium 2, but if you just want a more Kanto direct experience, Stadium 1 is absolutely fine. It's completely serviceable. It's a fantastic game. You can't go wrong with that, but if you just had to pick between the two, you may as well go Stadium 2. So for all those reasons, I gotta be honest, is it the best Pokemon game on the Nintendo 64? Yeah, I think it is, at least for me personally. I mean, there's so much fun to be had in this game, and there's so much variety and versatility with this game. There's so many different things to do, whether it just be battling the Pokemon, you know, like through the cups and the Gym Leader Challenge, or the mini games, or of course the Game Boy Tower. I mean, this game can do it all. So I personally think it's the best and definitive Pokemon game on the 64. However, if you think Pokemon Snap or Puzzle League or Hey You Pikachu is better, I would not even bat an eye. I would not fight you on that at all. Everybody's entitled to their own experiences and their own opinions, and truly each of those games offer something entirely unique that you can't really get anywhere else. Obviously, Pokemon Snap got a sequel, but like, Hey You Pikachu, it may not be the best game, but it's definitely the most unique game. So that is, of course, just my own opinion. I definitely want you all to form your own and let me know down below what you think the best Pokemon game on the 64 is. And if you have any cool, fond memories, just put those down below too. I definitely want to hear your guys' experiences with these games because they're all, for the most part, extremely nostalgic for me. That is going to bring us to the end of this rambly, incoherent, unscripted, unplanned video. So thank you for bearing with me. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I had a fun time making it. I love talking about these games. I'm very passionate about Pokemon and the Nintendo 64 as a whole. So if you all enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like. I would greatly appreciate that as always. And of course, if you have anything else that you want to see from me or any other questions or comments, leave those down below. I'm definitely open to suggestions. I'm open to hearing you guys out. But without further ado, I'll see you all in the next video.